Hello everyone, this is Jose Herrera with the O3XX series, and with me my hermano Tyler Pollock. We have a special guest with us today, Benjamin Fortier. Benjamin has an extraordinary background, having served in the United States Marine Corps with 1st Battalion 25th Marines. In 2006, he deployed with his unit to the turbulent city of Fallujah in Iraq, experiencing firsthand the intense and violent realities of war. But Benjamin's journey extends beyond his military service. Born and raised in the northern part of Rhode Island, he has pursued various creative endeavors since 2009. He is a self-published poet with works that delve into the depths of human emotions and explore themes of mental health, mysticism, the supernatural, surrealism, and social issues. Additionally, Benjamin has honed his skills in sports photography, capturing the intensity and beauty of athletic endeavors. However, his path has not been without challenges. Following his combat deployment to the highly volatile city of Fallujah, Iraq in 2006, Benjamin embarked on a healing journey. It took him 15 years to delve into the depths of his own being, unearthing the raw thoughts, memories, and emotions that propelled him to join the Marine Corps in the aftermath of the September 11th, 2001 events. Today, we have the privilege of hearing Benjamin's remarkable story, filled with resilience, personal growth, and the power of creative expression. We hope you gain some substance from our dialogue. Semper Fidelis. I sit on some of these interviews for a very long time, man, and it's a lot of substance to chew on. Again, I started writing when I got out of the Marine Corps back in 2011. The only thing that I could do was write. I actually had journals in Iraq and both my tours to Afghanistan and then my stint when I was doing some contract work. So I always wrote. I didn't know how to write. I grew up poor as shit. And it's weird to see the evolution. I was so Seddon, Seddon, right? Jules.
Julian, yeah, a little
Yeah,
bit.
so it's funny. I was talking to Jules. I met Jules back in UNCW, and I was sharing with him a little bit that I had this, those green record books for the log book.
Yep.
I had one of those. I stole one of those from Gunny Wilkin and Grimmett's Hooch, and I just started writing notes. But it's crazy because in the font that I used when I was writing was all in caps,
Hmm.
and part of it was I wanted to let everything out as because it was a great. '09 was wild. It was like the Wild West, and I was writing in all caps
I
and
still write. That's the only way that I write still.
in all caps.
Yeah, it's weird. I honestly think it's from I took like drafting in high school.
Uh-huh.
So like the way you like write on blueprints has to be all like proper and fucking I mean it's kind of like chicken scratched out now, but
It's wild how like handwriting has, even I'm sure you guys have heard, people older than us be like, "Where's cursive gone?" and all this shit, and it's like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, where was it supposed to go? Like, who fucking, like, what is the evolution
They're
of
not teach
handwriting?
so
Is
I
there
heard like
a,
yeah, I heard they're not teaching it in
Yeah.
most schools, right? Cursive, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
heard the
people,
same thing.
so no one has a signature. It's funny, kids in high school, because I work with high school students, they don't know how to do their signature, so they ask, like, I don't know how to do my signature. I can't write in cursive, so they just do some
Scribble
chicken
it.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy.
That's
It's
Yeah,
wild.
wild, dude.
that was one thing I didn't really like about the Moto Mail stuff, dude. Like there's something about getting like a handwritten letter,
Yeah.
especially if somebody knows has nice handwriting and like it lays it out all nice. Women are really good at that. Not to like go that route, but like
Yeah,
I
dude.
honestly feel like
Yeah, dude.
they spend a lot of time focusing on having like pretty handwriting, which is cool. But
Yeah. Dude, that
Dude,
totally unlocked a memory for me. Totally forgot that the Moto Mail came out like fucking printed, like
yeah.
and like you'd open it like a check almost,
Yeah,
like as you
yeah,
like
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
like the
Yeah,
little
dude.
perforations and
yeah.
shit. It's like what the fuck?
But it's
This
like, yeah,
doesn't
this
feel
is cool.
genuine.
No, you're like, it's cool. They just like basically shot a message on instant messenger and someone printed it
Right.
out. But
My the girl that I was dating broke up with me through Moto Mail.
oh,
Oh,
really?
Yeah, dude.
that's brutal.
That's fucked up, right?
Yeah.
Motivational mail, dude. It's like I started seeing someone else. it's not gonna work out. You've changed. I'm like, oh my God, like, all right. Yeah.
Demoto
Um,
mail.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I thought it was cool. My wife, my girlfriend at the time in 2011, she would send letters and she would spray her perfume on it. So there I was, like in my hooch,
That's
just
clever. Yeah.
just nothing that. I thought that was cool. Yeah, dude, the intimacy, the intentional work that goes behind journaling, writing letters, there's a lot to it. Dude, I have a
Sure.
whole stack of letters still from all my deployments. Yeah, and sometimes I read it. Some of them still have dust in it. I think that's cool. So then you have the opportunity to start, wherever you want to start. You can start from the beginning. Um, we've been doing a thing lately where kind of just ask, what's right with you, rather than, going into the dark end or the abyss. But
Yeah.
yeah, man.
I mean, at this point in time, I haven't really considered myself much of like, I haven't I haven't like run under the guide onto the banner of like, veteran writer and stuff like that. My first book came out in 2009 to not much acclaim. Like, I didn't really tell anybody about it. I had just come home from Iraq like a couple years prior. I was in Fallujah in 2006 with the 1st Battalion, 25th Marines. And I had been writing for a long time. Like as a teenager, I was writing a lot. I was doing a lot of lyrics. I'm a musician as well. So I found myself in a position of, just writing music, writing lyrics along with the music and stuff like that. So by the time 2009 came around, I was like 20, 21, and I was like, I just have all the shit. And I've always wanted to put out a book. And at that time, what is now Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing was called Create Space.
Hmm.
So you could do like a variety of like multimedia, like books, fucking CDs, music, blah, blah, blah. But it was self-publishing essentially. So I went that route and I published out my first book and I was just like, all right, cool. Got that off my chest, like felt good about it. Did my last book in 2019, which was a similar route, just kind of like lots of poems that built up over time, curated them, went through them, and just self-published. And now I feel pretty lucky to have been teamed up with Dead Reckoning Collective, who are a great group of folks, and I'm doing my first war-oriented, solely focused on war. Like 80% of it is, based upon personal direct experience, because I think a part of me has been trying to like find like a way to tell that story to just kind of get it out there. And I have lots of interests, so I kind of like toyed around with like a documentary idea that didn't really work out. There's just too many moving parts, and to do it right in my eyes, like the vision of like grandiosity, like I would have needed like a huge team and shit. So at the end of the day, it kind of boiled down to coming out with a poetry collection, and that has just kind of spearheaded, uh, my finally coming out as like a veteran writer and stuff. Because the other two books, I didn't really carry that acclaim. I didn't really care, and the poetry books themselves weren't so much about Fallujah or whatever. They were like, it was a couple war poems spattered here and there, but it was more about like grief, loss, the human condition, existential shit that goes on. So that's kind of where I am right now. Whatever you wanna unpack, I'm happy to, go down that path with you.
Yeah, man. Well, let's start at the beginning. We're you East Coast, West Coast. What year did you join? All that stuff. Let's go into that, man.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Rhode Island, a little town called Burrillville. Had a decent family life growing up. Had a much older brother growing up. He was like 9 years older than I am. So um, not much military history in my family. Like grandparents did the thing, but no one I knew like directly, had seen like any action or anything like that. It was just kind of a personal calling. It was like I always knew, excuse me, I always knew that like the artistic side spoke to me very much. I considered myself, you know, very much in line with getting into, film or photography or writing and stuff like that. That's kind of what called to me. But there was also another calling, like to prove myself, as a man, as a warrior, as a citizen too. I really love history. I was all swept up in like World War II history. I read a ton of Vietnam novels, like Navy SEAL novels, like Green Berets, Delta Force, Recon Dudes, Carlos Hathcock, all that shit. And I was just like absolutely blown away by that stuff. The warrior culture, the elite kind of tip of the spear kind of shit was super intriguing to me. But I never was like very physically like fit or anything like that. So I kind of had to start to like work on that myself. So, at come high school and stuff, I didn't jive with like a lot of the sports. So I kind of did like my own thing on the side. I was doing karate and, like weightlifting at home and shit like that. So just kind of prepare myself because throughout my teenage years, I was, toying with the idea of like some kind of reserve component slash part-time component, which was very prevalent in my area. There's tons of National Guard units up here. There's tons of Army and Air National Guard. There's, Army Reserve guys, and the whole gambit too is from fucking Motor T to Special Forces. They have them pretty cramped up in here. So up until that point, I of going the Marine Corps route, I was like, our Air National Guard, Army National Guard, it sounds pretty cool. And then I found out about the Marine Reserves. I was like, oh, well, shit, that sounds badass. Who wouldn't, like to me, going I had like visions of like Ranger School or whatever, but I wanted to also show myself that I could kind of test drive the car, see if I like it, in some kind of way and see how I fit in like with the culture. So once I found out about the Marine Corps Reserve, I was like, that seems fucking dope because, you could be a Marine, which, hardest basic training, a basically trained Marine is, years above, the basically trained soldier, so we were, convinced. And it's depends on what you put into it is what you get out of it, obviously. But to me, that was like, all right, Army's down here, Marine Corps is up here. Like if I could do that, like that would be badass. So that was the route I went. At 17, I signed my name away. Well, my parents did because I couldn't. My buddy and I, Mark, went to boot camp together, which was pretty wild. Like best friends growing up, fucking did like we were both in like Civil Air Patrol together. So like we were like dorks. Like we were the military dorks of our like high school class and shit. So for us to go off to boot camp together surprised 0% of like our friend group and stuff. So it was wild. And he was the epitome of like the Greek god that I wanted to be, like he was like the football player and the fucking, super like in shape and shit. So I looked at him and I was like, fuck, man, like I want this dude to like be across from me and like, so like we can, I can have some fucking motivation and got through it. He became a squad leader. He was hot shit and everything, but I got through it and surprised myself, because boot camp's intense. You're never you can try to, anticipate what that's going to be like, but you just don't know until you're actually there and like, you're anticipating the velocity to be here and it's like, so
What year was that? Was it '05?
that was, yeah, I went to Paris Island like 10 days after I graduated in 2005. Yeah.
Damn. Yeah. Different times back then, man. I never went to Paris Island. I went to the
Yeah,
West
he's
Coast, man.
Jose's a
Yeah.
He's a Hollywood Marine.
That's all
That's
good,
a that's
man.
a big debate on here all the time, but
Yeah.
we
I've
know
I've I,
we know
Yeah.
where the OGs come out of. That's all good.
but yeah, I mean boot camp is, you know, is what it is. And to me, like the drill and ceremony shit like never clicked with me. I was much more of like I wanted to like, you know, like do mount and fucking combat shit. That was really what spoke to me. And I remember just being completely like shattered during basic warrior training. Like that shit fucking broke me off, dude. And I was like, this is like the like just scratching the surface of like grunt life. And I was like, oh man, like what have I gotten myself into? So I went and contracted as an 0341, because that's what, you know, my unit needed. So it was basically you could go infantry route or, you know, what was closest to your duty, you know, what was closest to your home address is kind of how they would contract you. So they'd say, okay, within 50 miles of your home address, there's an infantry unit and there's a motor T unit. And I was like, well, infantry, please. That sounds great. I knew what it was. It's not like I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Like I said, I had visions of grandiosity prior. So I was like, yeah, dude, fucking infantry sounds good. 41 was like, I was like, that sounds dumb. Like I had a GI Joe of a 41, and I
Yeah.
was like, I'm just gonna keep him in his like little thing because he looks like a dork, fucking dropping artillery rounds. But it was badass. It's a fucking cool
Yeah.
job. So
Yeah. So wait, you got to actually choose? Like they're like, "Oh, you're here. You got these two units. What do you want?" Was that in boot camp?
no, that was way prior. That was like
Oh,
during like
okay.
the recruiter like
Right, right.
stages. Yeah, sorry, I kind of
No,
mixed up the
I
timeline a
was
little
just
bit.
trying to understand because I know a lot of people like myself. I tell this story so many times on here, but I went like my recruiter's like, "Oh yeah, open contract." I wanted infantry. You know what I mean? And when they got there, my I was a 51, but my senior drill instructor was a 51. I didn't even know what that was. I just wanted to be the, you know, the gun guy. And but I was open contract was my MOS. And like I was talking to him about it. I was like, dude, like, and he's like, I don't know if you're gonna be able to get that because if you go to boot camp as like active duty open contract, it's basically like they give you whatever.
Right.
You don't get a say at all. And ended up I left there as having a supply MOS, got back to recruiter duty or whatever for like 30 days before we ship out. And I was like, dude, I'm gonna go UA if you don't change this shit.
No shit.
To my
That's awesome.
recruiter, basically it all worked out for better or worse, but they ended up
Nice.
doing the paperwork and switching it. But yeah, you said that, and I was like, damn, like was he at boot camp and he got to choose that, but it was beforehand.
Right. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that you were 51 because I was contracted to be a 51 and I was like, fuck yeah, that sounds awesome. Like I remember at MEPS, that's where they told me that. And then somewhere along that line, they changed it because, you know, I guess it's kind of like with the reserve unit, like it depends on how like the platoons are fluctuating and shit, you know. So if you get
Right.
like, you know, if you need 41s, then, you know, that's
Yeah.
what you are. So that was cool. ITB was pretty cool. You know, fucking that's where I found out that we were going to Iraq. Actually, that's like where I first learned that the Lance Corporal Underground has a little bit of clout, a little bit of clout.
So you found out when you were at ITB that your unit was going to deploy, like after you
Yeah.
left.
Yep. There was I was just waiting in line, shooting the shit with some dude, and you know, just categorically, I think like we were in like a medical line or something. You know, it was like reservists in this line, you know, active guys in this line in ITB, and you know, there was only like a handful of the reservists. So, you know, I get to shooting the shit with the guy, and he was comes from the unit that I was going to check into. At the time, there was a contractual option where you could. It was weird. I don't even know when they stopped doing it or started doing it. I think it was like during like the peacetime where you could go to boot camp, and then instead of going into the SOI pipeline, they would go right to their unit and do like on the job training. So like you could like start up school, you could fucking, you know, get your job going, and then you'd go to ITB, which so I met a dude who did that. So he had already checked into 125 and he had gotten the lowdown that like, oh yeah, the orders are coming down January 1st, 06, we're going to Iraq. So I was like shooting the shit with this dude, and this was like October-ish, of '05. So I had a few months notice, and I was like, all right, time to fucking mentally prep for that. But at this point, I was like, dude, what better timing for me, like fucking just knocking out the training schools, fucking and just getting right into, active orders. It felt wild, but it was cool.
I mean, were you anticipating that to deploy? Like, were you looking forward to
It
that when?
fast.
Yeah, but it happened real quick. I mean, I was at that point, it was 2005, 6. We knew that like the op tempo for, the reserve and the National Guard components was changing dramatically. And I had my finger on the pulse of that shit because I was just into that. And, like I knew names like Rafael Peralta and stuff like that. Like I was following what was going on in Iraq. So to hear that, you know, National Guard units were getting activated and stuff, it wasn't surprising. But for me to like realize how quick it was going to be was a bit of a like it was a bit of a fucking wake up call for sure. I didn't think it was going to be that quick.
Yeah, you didn't have time to go back home and parade around like you're this bad boy and shit. They're like,
Little
no,
bit, just a
get on
little.
the plane. You're going, dude. You're like, damn.
Yeah,
Well,
right from.
I
Go
didn't,
ahead, Jose.
dude. No, I was just gonna say I didn't realize that guys could go to their unit, get on the job training, and then go to SOY.
I've
Dude,
heard
if
that.
I,
Yeah,
Yeah, I've
bro,
heard
if
that
I would have
before.
went to the fleet as just straight out of boot camp without going to ITB, dude, we would have been fucked.
yeah. Imagine that.
Yeah,
Dude, no way, man.
Reserve units are built a little differently than fleet units. It's a little more chill. Um, I don't remember. I remember when we were doing our pre-deployment shit. We went over because we were with Fifth Marines, and so we were basically, we did like 3 months or so of like workup training. Most of it was at Devon's, which was fucking stupid because it was like the dead of winter. There's like a foot and a half of snow. We were doing like fucking
Oh
combat
shit.
shoot, and like it's like what the fuck, like this isn't gonna be Iraq, dude. But you got to get it in when you can. And then we finally went over to Pendleton. We did some like a division schools thing at Margarita, which was pretty fucking cool. I felt really on my game. It was like me and a shit hot gun team, and like we got like I think like best in the border class or something like that, so that felt good. And then finally went over to Pendleton and 29 bombs and shit like that. And I remember this is getting to this is when I realized that the reserve units are a little different from the fleet units. Is I remember getting to like the bricks or whatever, and like we had our own assigned fucking giant barracks and shit like that. But I remember just like hearing kids. It was like a Thursday or a Friday or whatever, just getting screamed at by like fucking, lance corporals and corporals, just like getting their asses chewed out. I was like, where the fuck am I, dude? Like, this is nowhere near like a drill field or anything. But yeah, it was like, some like fucking active duty battalion, like reaming out their new boots or whatever. So I looked at my NCOs and I was like, thank you for being like nice to me.
Who was the oldest guy in your unit?
Like, well, that's like age wise
Yeah, like
or
age wise.
Uh, it's funny because we actually had a couple guys that were like in their 30s, who went to like Desert Storm with 125 and like
Oh
we're
shit.
like, oh fuck, like we want
Fuck,
to go
dude.
to dude, it's wild, like, and to think, and I hang out with these guys every now and again now, and I'm like, dude, how did you do that? Like, I feel like trash right now, like, and you're like wanting to go like back into yeah. So like, we had a couple guys that like heard that we were going to Iraq, like wanted to get some, joined up. So we had a couple guys in their 30s, one of my friends was like in his like mid 20s. Dude, it's such like a weird like spectrum of like people that and it's voluntarily, it's the draft has been gone for a long time now, but like it's just so it was a wild spectrum to see. And I was thinking it's going to be all fucking New England dudes, It's like 60% that, and then the 40% like people from wherever. And New England obviously is more diverse than just fucking what I envisioned in my head, fucking WASP people or whatever. So it was cool, man. Yeah. So to answer your question, it was like me as a 19-year-old, and then like fucking like dudes in their 30s that had like already gotten some and were coming back. It was actually nice because the guy who ended up being my VC throughout the whole deployment was a 3.5 Phantom Fury vet, and he
Oh
had
shit.
just gotten out, and he was like, "Oh, you guys are going to Fallujah? Sign me up! Like I have some unfinished business there." And he ended up, we were super tight. Like he was my fucking VC the whole time. Like I was a driver for him the whole 7 months. But yeah, he was a badass. So dude, like very like it's not what I would have imagined, But then again, we have to think like this is 2006. It's like the height of like all fucking like we gotta go into Iraq and because shit's getting bad.
Yeah. Going through ITB, there was a couple of guys that got. They didn't get to graduate. They left pretty early because the units needed bodies, and the talk of the town was Ramadi, 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 Ramadi. And then I got to the fleet in April 27th, 2007. And then 6 months later, we deployed to Ramadi, Iraq. And that was like a whole different, it was crazy because we relieved 2-7, I think, right, Paulie?
Yeah.
2-7. And I guess they had seen shit in the beginning. And then was it the awakening that took place? And then everything just like died off.
Mm.
And it became
Yeah.
like this massive training ground for us.
Yeah, it was crazy. Nothing really happened. I mean, I hate saying that because we did lose two guys in a massive SV bid. Or we lost one and then 1-9 did, but I remember going on RIP patrols, like patrolling the Ramadi streets and like every building. Yeah, I mean, you know what it looks like in a hellhole like that. Every building's torn to pieces, bullet holes everywhere. The 2-7's like squad leader, because it was only a small group of us. It was me, my squad leader, and then a couple other dudes with like half of their squad and some Iraqi police doing like foot patrols. And he's like, "Watch that building." He's like, "You turn this corner, they'll shoot you in the back from here." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm like, what the fuck?" And it was like relatively calm the whole time, which was just wild for considering what place we were in. But
Do
Yeah.
you guys feel like your TTPs though were like elevated to like like counterinsurgency levels
dude,
or
our whole battalion was like, and not to shit on the guys, but like we were all boots, man. We had a small cluster of like leadership that had been, had combat experience, but it wasn't like we weren't. I felt like we were trained well enough to like know patrolling and like doing certain shit, but it just nothing was happening for so long that everybody I think was so complacent. If the heat would have turned up, we would have been in bad shape, dude. Honestly, we were to the point where we're like foot racing across rooftops of homes, like just running through homes with people in them, and there'd be
for
like what
shits and giggles?
yeah, just like we'd have two squads out and be like, we're gonna race to the other side,
Oh my God,
of
that's
the city.
funny.
Yeah, just like it could have been bad, man. There- and
Dude,
there was just a lot of people doing dumb shit, but I think our chain of command had a good relationship with the Iraqi police because
Mm.
we had a lot of them, living with us in the same compounds. And there were units north of us that were having dudes getting killed on posts by these IPs and
I was
stuff.
gonna say, dude, that's
Yeah,
sketchy as
one
fuck,
one
it
eight,
dude.
was. It
one
was. It
eight.
could, like, we got lucky, man, or I don't know. It could have been timing, but yeah,
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 when I
we
was there, they were not to be trusted.
right.
Not to be trusted.
Did you guys didn't even like? Did you work with them, or were you like split up
A
completely?
little bit,
A little
a
bit.
little bit. What were you gonna say, Jose?
I used to fucking beat these guys. OP at OP South. Our we had Sergeant Lacey was our squad leader. He had come from Fast Company, and our op tempo was pretty high. We did a lot of raids. Even though if we were doing counterinsurgency work and like trying to like hearts and minds shit, dude, we weren't doing hearts and minds. We were just fucking kicking in these fucking doors, doing hits, fucking wrangling up all these fucking people and pissing them off. And that's all we did. And then we got to Malab. The tempo changed there. And we got to Malab because I don't know what it is, but there's a certain demographic of human beings that seem to mess it up for everybody. We had a couple of gingers that decided to taint our bottled water and do other obscene things, and they got flagged, and we had to do what's called a tactical move, and so we got sent to Malab, JSS Malab, and who was it? It was Locke and Kohler's. I can't remember. It was like who got sent to South, OP South.
Yeah, that was like Skins and all them.
Yeah.
Kohler shoe. Anyway, what Jose's talking about is they were in a bunch of OPs around the city, like just small platoon or less size. And the JSS was like the joint security station where we had IPs living with it was literally just a doorway separating us versus like 30 Iraq police, dude. And we would be going on foot, we would have to mix like half of our patrol with these guys. And there would be dudes with like the PKMs and shit. And they'd be like in broken Arabic telling us about how they a couple years ago would engage Marine patrols. Like they were the insurgents.
It was
Yeah.
Luge.
Yeah.
They were like,
Yeah.
dude, I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, are you fucking serious? Like, I'm gonna kill you right now.
Yeah, right. What makes you think that I shouldn't just fucking frag you tonight? Yeah.
Right. You're like, oh, this Marines come here. Me? Do. I'm like, what?
Yeah, dude. They were bad news for sure. I mean, for us it was unique that we were in weapons company, so the way that it worked with how they kind of spread out 1st Battalion, 25th Marines throughout the city was like weapons took care of Baria, which was like an old I think like 82nd Airborne like fucking built that, but it was basically like an old resort area, which was pretty wild. It was like surrounded like by like these like houses and like a couple big lakes and shit and some compound areas and shit. So we would roll out of there, and the line companies were, scattered throughout. One of them was right directly in the middle of the city in an old like government compound, and then the other line companies were like one was out of a train station, the other one was out of like an ECP. So we were basically QRF, doing a lot of like reaction patrols, a lot of IED sweeps. We didn't really have like a lot of engineer or EOD assets. Like EOD was on call, but those guys might not even show up sometimes. So, like if we knew that there was going to be a big like convoy coming through the city or something, like we would be up at 4 sweeping for IEDs, just checking shit out, blah blah blah. So it was pretty wild, and it wasn't super kinetic until they like released a bunch of prisoners from Abu Ghraib, and that is obviously fucking terrorist university. So like they just came and flooded back into Ramadi and Fallujah, and those were the two cities that were just getting lit the fuck up. And at the end of our tour, like we started seeing tactics that we had never seen before. One of the trucks in my platoon fucking hit a pressure plate IED, blew up into the underbelly of the truck. Fucking, we had not seen anything like that. Before that, it was just all like side hits, like 2 155s or a few mortar rounds or whatever, and those were manageable. They'd rock you, but they were manageable. But like we started seeing like kills, like catastrophic kills, like completely wrecking the Humvee. 3 guys were killed in one fucking attack. One was like really badly burned. My unit was on patrol. We reacted to that. That was fucking horrific. And the same day, my captain got his truck blown up with an RPG. So we rolled back to Baria, fucking refit. We're down 1 truck. So now I'm the lead truck. We roll out of Baria to go spend the night at an entry control point, fucking drive it along. My MVGs are down, we're blackout, and MVGs light up, fucking, that sound, and I'm like, God damn it! What the fuck, dude? Like it was like a 20-hour day at that point. And I turn around, fucking my my machine gunners fucking going to town. Like there's a compound across from where the like to the north of the highway. It was like a 4-lane highway. Um, and then there were like these little like side streets, kind of like in Texas, where like they have like the streets that follow the freeway. So like across from there was a compound where we were taking fire from and shit. And I fucking seeing like Marines getting dragged, and it was chaos. By the time I realized what was going on, I had like my fucking, you know, had to get in position, get my gunner in position. He was just fucking going to town with the 240, and my VC Tim, who was the 3.5 veteran, was like, go easy, go easy. Like he's seen this shit before. Like this was the first thing for all of us. Like we had been in contact and shit, but like this was like the heaviest day for us, basically. So that was a game changer, man. And we only had about 3 or 4 weeks left in on the deployment at that point. So a couple weeks after that, like we were doing our RIP, left seat, right seat with 124, another reserve unit. And we were like, yo, you guys fucking hold on to your butts. Like, get ready for this shit. Like, cause it's getting real. And they got rocked. They hit a ton of like V bids, and I think they had like double RKIA. They had like 22 KIA, few hundred, fucking Purple Hearts. It was a bad season for them, and we told them, man, like we saw it. We saw the writing on the wall, man. It was getting nasty. So I'm glad I got out of there when I did with my bits and pieces and shit. But yeah, definitely some rough times for sure.
What month did you enter country?
We were there from March to October.
Oh shit, you got to see the fighting season
Yeah.
then.
Yep.
Damn.
Yeah, like for the spring and the summer, it was like mild, but like towards the end of the summer into like the autumn, they were ramping it up for sure. Yeah.
That's wild. Um, did you ever come across maybe across the net or like commanders a guy named uh Colonel Gronsky?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Okay. Now we had interviewed a retired major general who at the time around the 0506 area time frame was I think it was like he was commanding the brigade out of Ramadi, and my mentor Mark he worked for him, and they met during that time frame whenever they were in Iraq. I was just curious, crazy. It's the Marine Corps. Well, he was in the Army, but Marine Corps is such a small world that coming across people that just thought I'd ask that.
Yeah, yeah. I know that there were a lot of guys that were while I was over there, they were getting pulled. Like they were like, "Oh yeah, we're going up to this place called Ramadi." I was like, I don't know what that is, but yeah, no, that was like where a lot of that was kind of like where like mini Phantom Fury like was happening because they were like taking chunks of the city and just like fucking being like, all right, yeah, we're pushing through here. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the city enough to be like, why would anyone do that like that? But
yeah.
is what it is. They didn't want any bad press from what happened, from Phantom Fury and that whole thing. So
What was taking contact for you the first time? What was that like?
fuck, man, it was exciting. A bit nerve-wracking, but I was in a truck. I felt pretty safe. It's wild. I appreciate training in the pits because you actually do get to know what it's like to have rounds, snap over you and shit, and you kind of start to, it's tough to gauge without like some kind of like equipment or something, but like, you can kind of gauge like where shots are coming from and stuff like that. But yeah, no, it was a little exciting. It was a little exciting until, people started getting fucking hurt, and then it was like, uh, it's not so fun anymore. And but I felt fairly safe in the trucks, and that's where we spent most of our time. I didn't do really any dismounted stuff. I dismounted a few times, but come like I said, like summer, they were like, it's getting a little dangerous. Button up. Like fucking, if you don't need to be out of the truck, stay in the truck. Fucking, keep your gunners down at all times. And it was wild because like I remember like it was the MSR that went through there was very, very, very busy. So, we would see units that would come in and like they would do their TTPs that they probably learned somewhere that were, outdated. They'd be getting out of their trucks and be like, no, 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 no. It's like, what are you doing? Like, get back in your fucking vehicle. They were like, I'm looking for IEDs though. And it's like that we don't do that anymore. Don't do that. So it was wild, man. Like when we went there too, those were our TTPs, like 5 and 25, like dismount, blah blah blah. But like we had to adapt pretty fucking quickly. And thankfully we had some seasoned leadership. Otherwise, like getting back to what Tyler said, like we were all basically like fucking reserve boots with zero combat experience. And I'm pretty grateful that we had guys like Tim, my VC, to fucking join along and be like, all right, well, somebody should probably help these dudes out.
Yeah, dude. Have you ever watched Generation Kill?
Oh yeah, yeah, I love that show.
um, my only like frame of reference for like reserve units is like towards the end, whenever they're gonna take Baghdad, and that's like the picture that I have of reserve units.
Yeah.
the guy rolls up with a fucking big ass Texas horns, the long horns, this fucking
Yeah.
Humvee.
Dude, that's accurate because we had guys from Oklahoma and they did that shit. I'm not like they had like the long steer horn. Yeah. It was wild.
Well, that's pretty cool, man. So towards the end, so when did you get back stateside?
We were stateside probably like November, December time frame. We demobbed out of Pendleton. And then we came back to Devon's, and then I was living back with my parents, which
What
is
was
just absolutely fucking mind-boggling for for me.
Yeah, what was that like, man? Just
I can't even describe it. It was because it was I had almost wished for that active duty experience at that point, just because the ball had been rolling for so long, and the tempo was just rocking and rolling. To come back home and like just kind of get back into like more or less civilian life was incredibly difficult. I was, I had felt like I had like a wicked chip on my shoulder as like, a 19-year-old combat veteran and all this. So, working at like Sears as a merchandise pickup guy was like below me and all this stuff. And my parents, I was living with them at the time. They started getting a divorce. So that was really, really difficult. I had to basically just kind of find healthy coping mechanisms, which I kind of did, but more or less I was drowning myself in unhealthy coping mechanisms. Alcohol, fucking just getting fat and just and I still had 4 years of my contract too. So it's not like, like, all right, I'm all done now, fucking. So I took a few months off for drill because, they were like, all right, you can just take it easy for a little bit. And then I drilled for about a year and a half, and it was awful. I was terrible. I, was like putting on weight. My runtime was horrible. Like I was fucking just, I was job efficient, but I was like, I should have been better. And especially knowing that we had a deployment coming up to Afghanistan in 2011, that hearing that news like really like took the wind out of my sails. And I was like, all right, well, just looking at my, just self-evaluating, I don't think I'm going to be able to hang. You know, I don't want to be a liability, but I also like had just these torn feelings of like, you know, being like a shitty Marine and being like a potential liability on the front lines, and also being one of the only people with combat experience to, you know, help with these, you know, these new dudes who are coming into the unit who they also need, you know, somebody to look up to. But I was like, you don't want to look up to me, man. Like, I'm a slob right now. So, come 2009, I ended up getting a medical separation. I'm not sure it's the decision that I kind of regret it, you know, in the sense that I wish maybe part of me had done something else, maybe, you know, like took a knee and been like, hey, like I'm not fit for duty, but I want to like maybe stay in the rear or something like that. But, you know, I was just so narrowly focused that I was like, okay, my only path out of getting out of the way of, you know, a combat deployment is, you know, med sep. And not for nothing too, I was really struggling putting on the uniform. I was having fucking panic attacks, like going up to drill and shit like that. It was a rough time. Um, I mean, somewhere between the time I came back and started like drilling again, I did start going to therapy at the VA and stuff, but that was a long road in itself too. And you guys were talking a little bit earlier. It took like VSOs, veteran service organizations like the DAV, like AMVETS, to really, you know, get me like into the proper channels as far as you know, compensation and benefits and things like that. But you know, it took me a long time too to kind of find therapies and healthy coping mechanisms that clicked with me. You know, I think somewhere in my mid 20s, I started really clicking with mindfulness and you know, mindfulness based stress reduction. Once I that kind of jived with me, I got back into another CBT program, and that was like, oh, okay, wow, these two worlds, they really connect very well. So that was super helpful for me, and obviously writing and stuff like that. You know, anything that kind of gets you into that flow state, that mindset, that you know, the where you can just be, you know, one with what you're doing and whatnot. That's been pretty helpful. So it's been a long road, guys, and I'm glad to share my story with you. And yeah,
I got
let's
a, I
keep
got a
going,
quick question. I got a quick question about that. Just to backpedal a little bit.
please.
How when you got home, how because that's interesting to me. I mean, you brought up the point, and I'm thinking like, when we came back from deployments or whatever, being on active duty, like you're surrounded by people that just went through the same shit with you. But as a reservist, what was the time frame after you got home to where you were actually back living your part-time warrior life, like civilian, doing mainly your civilian shit again? Was that like
It-
quick?
yeah, it was like I had, you know, Christmas 2007, like at my family's home, you know, and nope, sorry, Christmas 2006. And you know, and like 3, 4 months prior to that, I was getting fucking blown up with my friends.
Yeah,
So it was really weird, you know, and like as much as I wanted to like see my family, you know, and all that shit, like come, you know, night 4 or 5, I'm waking up being like, where the fuck am I right now? Like, why am I back at my parents' house? Like, I'm in my like childhood like bedroom. Like, what the fuck am I doing? It just felt like I like went into like this completely different realm and
yeah,
came back to like this like, I, you know, this like it was wild, man. And I almost wish that I had that experience of like, you know, being back in the bricks with the boys or whatever, because and that was another thing too, is when I did start drilling, you know, sometime early mid 2007, um, I I didn't recognize a lot of faces, dude. Like a lot of the guys that went to Iraq with us, their contract was up. And they went to Iraq and like, you know, I remember a couple of them being like, "Oh, my fucking contract's up today." And I'm like, "Well, you're not going home, obviously. You know, we still got another 4 months or whatever." And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, I know. I fucking know." But they're like, "Yeah, man, as soon as we're out of here, I'm fucking done." So a lot of my Tim, my VC, he was out. My turret gunner, he went back to the line company, I think, to finish his contract or whatever. And I looked around, I only recognized a couple faces, and I felt utterly fucking alone. Despite wearing the uniform, despite fucking, all like the family shit, and it didn't help that like we had senior NCOs coming in and like talking shit to us, being like, I don't give a fuck where you were, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, what is happening right now? Like, it just felt like a complete disconnect from like my ideology of, like a teenager of like family and fucking everyone's gonna look out for you and everyone's gonna understand. And it was like, whoa, it's just completely eye-opening for me. And I didn't think that I was gonna have like this just such a hard disconnect, like not even between being at home and shit like that, but even just like getting back into drilling and getting back into, you know, putting on the uniform and shit like that. It was like, what happened to my people? Like, what's going on?
So do you guys really like did you fucking drill?
Yeah,
Holy fuck,
it
dude.
was stupid. It
How
was
often would
stupid.
you like train on the guns and stuff? Like would you shoot ranges as a
Yeah,
mortarman? Did you
yep,
got to do that quite a bit?
yeah. No, every weekend basically,
And
every
then you
drill
would drill.
weekend.
And then you would drill too.
That was our drill.
That's so you weren't marching around.
Yeah, yeah. When I say drill, I'm sorry. When I say when I say drill, like it
That would suck, dude.
encompasses like the
Yeah.
field exercises and shit. Yeah, yeah.
What
Yeah. We would
were you marching too?
not like ceremonially, but like we would get into like,
Sure, right. Just to
yeah,
go. Yeah, all right.
yeah, yeah.
No, because I
Um,
know like after Jose, were you were back long enough? Because I know like after the 2011 deployment, like they started like actually doing marching shit, like
they
practicing that stuff.
I had to go to one reserve because my contract officially ended in 2014,
Right.
and I had to report one time. But it wasn't like a drill. I mean, they called it a drill, but it was more like it was like a
Like a
massive, like,
muster, like
yeah. But
yeah.
then they
Yeah.
had like vendors for like jobs and shit. Like the
Yeah.
Hmm.
VA was there and stuff like that, and
Well,
I had to.
I know the unit though. They started like practicing hardcore, like snap and popping, dude.
Oh, 2-8?
Yeah.
Oh
A
no.
lot of the I guess because the tempo slowed down and they're like transitioning out of like heavy combat
Yeah. Oh my
operations.
God.
They're like, we got to get
No.
back to our roots where we're fucking
That
in.
sucks.
We got to get back to our roots. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
not
feel
that far
too.
back. God damn it.
Yeah. I feel too, dude. Uh, I feel that sometimes guys hid um in the barracks. Like guys were going through shit and they necessarily couldn't talk about it, but the fact that you had other guys around and you were their presence kind of like mitigated, like brought those emotions down.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine. I mean, I do actually. I know what that feels like. That feels like right after I got out of the Marine Corps in 2011, where like literally Camp Lejeune is right there and guys are still there, but I'm not. I'm not there anymore. Like I'm out of the gun club.
Mhm.
Was there anybody in your town or in the city that you live that was a combat vet that you could actually relate to, talk to, maybe share that burden, or were you just like you were like alone, completely alone?
Outside of the guys that I was still hanging out with and chatting with that were still drilling, I didn't talk to anybody really. I didn't. I did start some therapy, like individual therapy and stuff like that, and that's where I kind of started to break that ice. But no, I didn't. I didn't find myself connecting with anyone other than my friends that were still drilling. So yeah.
What about your boy that you went to boot camp with? What was he at the time?
He went active duty, so he was
Oh shit.
by the time, and that's another thing too, is like I was the only one who went reserve. So I had a couple friends who, close friend of mine also went to the army. He was in he was actually in Ramadi around the same time I was there, and he saw some shit. And then he was in Ramadi in 2009 when you guys were there. He was with the tank units, and he was like, "Dude, what a fucking like 180 that was like for his deployment." So like all my like homies that were like combat vets were still doing their thing, circa 2007 to 2009. So yeah, I felt pretty, thankfully with the digital age and shit, I could just text people and whatnot. But there were like moments where I was like sitting at home, like drinking myself stupid and like weeping and like not understanding like why, I was feeling, well, kind of understanding why I was feeling the way I was feeling, but like not sure how to like process and like cope with like all the shit that was, going on in my head.
Gotcha. Yeah, dude. Yeah, that sucks. Uh, yeah. The barracks life can do a lot of good for you, but it could also do a lot of bad for you.
I could see that for sure.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, you
Because I'm
get
sure it
lost.
was like the same, kind of story. I'm sure there were dudes in the barracks that were just like,
Yeah, the difference was really nobody talked about shit. It's just like you
yeah,
knew where everybody is. So you're like, oh, I'm with good company. Like we're all fucked up together, right? And
right.
everybody's just drinking their asses off and being naked outside and stuff. Like it's like I'm
And
cool.
it's a normal day. Yeah,
Yeah, you're
right,
like
right,
I'm cool.
exactly.
This is where
Yeah.
this is where I belong, dude.
Yep. With all the misfits.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
dude.
that
Yeah.
Yeah,
Couldn't
you were
couldn't walk around naked around my house as much as I would have wanted to.
right.
yeah. I felt that there was what like alcoholics, PT holics, and then you're kind of like not nerds, but the guys that just fell in between there.
Just
Yeah,
weirdos.
yeah, dude. Yeah, the barracks. I don't know, man. The barracks that fucked my life up. Not fucked my life up. It just, man. All I ever did was work out and
Mhm.
train. That's all I did. And I mean, yeah, it did a lot of good, but it was also a lot of bad, man. I was like so obsessed with working out and training. Um,
Yeah, the barracks is a weird culture, man. It's great for the intended purpose. It like if you really step back and look at it, you're like, that's a perfect recipe to make a warfighter like want to do good.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of bravado. There's a lot of freaking this and that. Who's better at their job? Who's shit hot? Who knows what they're doing?
Yep.
And then and then you just give them a bunch of booze, really shitty gear all the time, shitty field
Mhm.
ops all the time, being miserable, then let them loose on the weekend so they can fucking act like idiots. It's just it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, that'd
Mhm.
be weird for me, man. I don't know, like I don't know how I would have done or what would have been different if like we just came back from like the 2009 deployment and then I'm just at fucking home. Like shortly after,
Right.
that was just that
Yeah,
was a good
it
even
was a
though
unique thing.
I'm sorry, even though I didn't feel like we had like a de they call it like decompression period, where you don't fucking do shit for a while and you just hang out, but like it wasn't really like it was a fucking thing. Like they just let people kind of, figure it out.
Mm.
And then which was good, which was necessary, but
Mm.
they probably could have really done better, I think, for everyone through that whole era.
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember coming back to California and like having to like sit through these like mandatory like classes and things like that with like, here's what the VA can do for you and blah blah blah. And everyone's just like da, 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 like what are we doing? Like no one was fucking paying attention. As much as they tried to like, get us thinking about this shit, like everyone just wanted to fucking go away.
Yeah, everybody wants to just be left alone. And that's the thing, like we had those safety standouts too, but it's like don't beat your wife or your girlfriend
yeah,
and shit. And don't blow all your money. And then, we all gotta do post deployment questionnaire shits, lie on everything about everything. Oh, by the
Yeah.
way, that's going to become your permanent medical record, but we're not telling you that. So,
Wow.
yeah. So, were you near a blast? No. Did
Really?
you
They
ever?
told you to lie about that shit?
Well, it wasn't like I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. The command wasn't saying that, but it was like, as a group, especially if you wanted to redeploy again, it's like,
Yeah, right,
don't
right.
fucking say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't say you're
Yeah.
injured. Don't say you tweak something, because then, you'd be looking at
Yeah. Don't
going
say
to
you want to kill
medical.
yourself or kill anyone else. I'm
Yeah.
fine.
Yep.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Hmm.
And deep down inside you, you're just ready to unleash hell. Yeah.
Onto something, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a weird thing too, man, because it's like, when you get back, you're just so like happy that you're home, right? You're like, I don't have to deal with that fucking bullshit lifestyle anymore. As far as being deployed, I know a lot of people like being deployed. I did too, but it's like you're just so happy to be home that you don't have to worry about that shit. But then you never like that's why it kind of for me, still even to this day, probably more so like it feels like a time warp. Kind of like you're saying, you're like, what the fuck? How can I be like, is that it's such a departure from what life at home is. You're like, did that really happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude.
You're like asking yourself, you're like, where the fuck were we just like a month ago? What, like, how can this be a thing where you just usher people over to do this fucked up shit, and then they're back here, and then he's like, all good. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
dude.
hard, that's a
It's a
hard one to
mind fuck.
grasp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a mind fuck, man. Dude. Yeah. So let's transition a little bit. January 2012, we're completely pulling out of Iraq. What are you thinking?
I mean, at the time, I guess I felt our work had been done. That it was just, I did my part, did the best I could. You know, but I was feeling pretty bitter about the whole experience still. And at that point, I was in like my mid-20s, had been out for a few years, had gotten a degree in did I get my degree in 2012? Yeah, I got my bachelor's in video production in 2012. Um, just kind of a little bit starting to find my footing. But I was pretty numb to like the whole like ISIS rolling around Mosul and Fallujah and Ramadi and shit like that. I don't think it was until HKIA last year, or 2 years ago or whatever it is now at this point, that I just had like an emotional fucking like wicked emotional reaction to the end of like GWAT or whatever. The end of Iraq was like, oh, okay, well that's good, I guess, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it was the pullout of Afghanistan that was a collective fucking trauma, man. You could probably almost ask any veteran, and they were like, yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, dude. August 2021 was a fucking shit show. Um, I think I felt more. I think what did me the most was the fact that I couldn't go and fight for these people. I wanted to fight. That was it. How are you just going to give up your fucking country like that? How are you just not? I mean, you know what I'm saying? And I operated in Kabul, completely fucking horrible place. It's yeah. Um, I don't know. I don't know how we have the greatest minds in this country. We send them, to all these Ivy League schools. We pour millions of dollars into them, and we come up with a stratagem that's so ineffective that it nearly causes the collapse of an entire country, at least monetarily. I mean, $8 trillion into over 20 years of war fighting, and we lose the strategic position that's capable of, countering the CCP's nuclear capability. Had we dropped the ball on that? So I think on one level, I have a strong distaste, probably just like most combat veterans do, against the political class. I have another distrust for commanders these days. Um, why does it seem that your once upon a time E3, E4, E5 guy who's been downrange knows more uh, tactically, strategically, and operationally than these folks do? And my guess it's a lot of it has to deal with the social political climate of today. We're attempting to deal with a myriad of issues that stem from everything from identity politics to all the recruitment issues and how to actually move into what we now call great power competition. And I don't know, careerism did something detrimental to, I think, the military in a sense. And I've been attempting to write about that for a very long time, how market principles, which are good in a way, we're in a capitalistic country, right? We have to provide some type of incentive for the warrior class to not just educate themselves, but move up and scale. But at what cost, right? So at what cost? And the cost that I typically talk about is kind of like a philosophical loss, which is we created a military that was based off of virtue, and as a result of these pervasive mechanisms, it became procedural, it became mechanical. And then now at the onset of this technological revolution and this tech ability to essentially completely obliterate a human body and in mass, it seems that we remove something essential. And when we remove that human dimension, we tend to remove it from the ranks. And what you're left with is kind of like this skeleton. And it's weird going back to like Camp Lejeune. It's weird talking to young Marines today because it's a totally different thing. It's like the war for us is still like some days it feels like I literally just came home, and then some days it's like Polly said, I'm like, did that really fucking happen?
Mm.
You know, it's like fresh, and and some of these other guys, I don't know how like you could do like a 4-year contract, 8-year contract, 20-year contract, whatever you want to call it, and it's just a totally different beast now. And I do have some like thoughts about how that can change, but I guess to circle back around, I'm still not over what happened in August of 2021. And that kind of what we talked about earlier when we first started, that still bothers me. On one level, we've whoever has to go down range has to deal with the idea that the United States now has one more negative check mark on leaving allies behind. Dude, I would hate to be in a capability where you're in a small unit and you have to go and conduct operations and you have to trust the locals. Who's going to trust Americans?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's weird how like one like unsuccess well, I don't want to say one unsuccessful, but like that whole withdrawal like just smeared. And we know that like especially in Afghanistan that was a fucking losing battle from the beginning. It was more sad for me like in Iraq because I honestly felt, especially when we were there in Ramadi, like we were it was basically humanitarian. Like we were like helping the community, right? And it
Mhm.
was like it was working, it was good. And you're like, no, this we're here to bang, but guess what? I'll do this too. We're interacting with the kids and the people by the end of the deployment. They liked us being there. And I think with Iraq, we really kind of did see that happen. Dudes went in, in your window, did the work, smoked the bad guys, and then kind of we were kind of building this place up to what it should have been. They're worlds apart anyway, Iraq and Afghanistan. Just the
Mhm.
way the people, at least where we were down south, like they didn't fucking want to deal with us at all. Not, civilians, nothing. Don't talk to us, nothing. But like in Iraq, they were working with us. They're and then to pull out of there, and then the whole ISIS shit, it's like, what the fuck? Like, this is stupid, right? But then in Afghanistan, it was never going to work ever. And we knew that. But we stayed there, lost a bunch of dudes. Yeah, killed a bunch of bad guys, which I don't think anyone that was there doing that work regrets any of that because they're fucking monstrous people, right?
Right.
Who am I? Every bad guy has a bad guy, right? We're their bad guy. So who's the good guy? But it's like they are fucking terrible humans. Just the
Right.
way they act and treat each other and don't value life. So they can die. And no one has a problem with that. I don't think. No one regrets that. But like the whole operation was a failure from the get-go. It's like we can't do what you're trying to do. Why are we really here? So all that said, when the withdrawal happens and it's a big fucking just a smear on GWAT entirely, now after the war's over with and it's fucking nobody's getting ribbons anymore, great, who cares? But like now, like what do Americans think about the global war on terror? Now everybody's like, we shouldn't have been there. And it's like, oh, great. 3 years ago, you didn't have a fucking problem with it. You probably didn't care. But now, because it's this big deal and all this fucked up shit happened, we lost a bunch of dudes that had no idea where they were going. They didn't even know where they were going there. Lost a bunch of service members, bunch of heinous like shit happened to civilians there trying to escape their country. Now everybody has his opinion that the whole war was a bad idea. So it's like, I'm not comparing to Vietnam because those dudes, we can't even fathom what those guys had to deal with there and coming home. But it's like kind of the same thing. Now Americans are like, we shouldn't even have been there. It's like, cool. After 9/11, you were all about it. You were all about it for a while. And then when people tell you I mean, I don't know. It's frustrating. It obviously fucks with me still too. It will all of us because it's like now we're blacklisted into being, well, who's dumb enough to join some shit like that? Well, if that's the way we're riding now, that explains why the fucking military is struggling to have people sign up and stay in. And so yeah, you want to push that way, you want to keep doing this, good luck. You're not gonna have fucking anybody that gives a shit about this place.
Mhm.
So,
And to
yes,
that point, the only branch this past year that made recruitment numbers was the Marine Corps, but at great cost. The
yeah,
morale, the yeah, dude, it's not good. Like it is not good. And I even question, like, I know in 2019 they're doing the stats of where the majority of recruits were coming from, and they're only coming from 6 states. That's not a good representation of the country.
Mm.
And then, and I know the either the neoliberal point of view would be, or are you justifying war? Do we need to have? Or no, I'm not saying that, but there's a level of defense and humanitarianism that goes with DoD whenever we have to respond to what could potentially become a threat, right? So if you take Haiti for example, or you take a tsunami that takes place, you create conditions, or conditions are created as a result of some type of environmental issue, and we don't respond to that, and we don't provide some form of like logistics or humanitarian aid and a coalition type effort, then we could potentially have adversaries be like, oh, you didn't come to our aid, well, fuck you, guess what, now we're gonna fucking do a form of terrorism as a result of your inability to fucking help us. It will help everyone else but not us. So there's a certain level of compromise that has to go with having equal representation from these states. Also too, it's crazy, the Genesis program that they implement now. So anyone who's attempting to get in, you have some type of medical condition, it is flagged through this fucking system. And
Heard about that. Yeah.
yeah, it's impacted numbers quite a bit. And that's where they're having a lot of issues as well. I can't remember the numbers, but there's an extensive um, There's a lot of people on ADHD. There's a lot of people with chronic illnesses. The I don't know how you measure IQ. I mean, I know there's a mechanism for measuring IQ, but it's like IQ doesn't really give you a robust uh, framework to understanding someone's intellect. You
Yeah.
may not be good at standardized tests, but you're able to, I don't know, do like atmospheres or biometrics, something different. You have a different capability, and so it doesn't really give you a full like scope of someone's actual intelligence.
Yeah. It's a
Um,
wishy-washy standard for sure.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so yeah, man, Afghanistan, and I think about the incoming. I mean, I'm of the mindset that we're already in World War III. We're already in a civil war right now. You look at political violence and political unrest, and our numbers have increased. You see the banks, what's happening right now. You see the CCP attempting to undermine the U.S. completely, and for good reason. We haven't kept our word. All we've done is essentially put up sanctions against countries. It's not working anymore. I don't think that this is about global dominance. I think that this is about interplanetary dominance. Astroeconomics is the next. I mean, astroeconomics has kind of been the thing. We need to now outsource for minerals and exotic uh, elements in order to move into the next phase of humankind. And now the space domain is part of that. And I don't think it's going to be the attacks aren't going to be physical. There might be minor. And when you look at the numbers for the money being poured into narrative centric attacks or emotion related information within automated systems like AI, the LLMs, and whatnot, it's a pretty big number. And it's a big number because right now we don't have the finite resources uh, to essentially conduct an operation to go into space to look for these minerals on these planets that are uninhabitable or giant moving rocks, and we need that. And so I don't think our adversaries are going to completely decimate us, or they can't even fucking mine in the United States, right? Because the United States is in abundance with minerals and elements that we need, but because of environmental policy, we can't tap into that. So it would be better just to essentially degrade our cohesiveness. And then as a result of our inability to financially support our country, we have to end up in turn working for them, providing them with those minerals. So how do you do that? That's the cognitive domain. And so one thing that I like about podcasting, one thing that I like about bringing guests on is that we're able to get what I call kind of like bio encryption, right? We're able to essentially build up mimetic composition where we're able to provide our community with a certain type of um, storytelling slash um, belief, ideas, and values that are a part of them or were once a part of them, and create a form of stability so that they're not, getting all crazed out. They're not alone. They're not upset. And so writing, art, physical fitness, podcasting, all that stuff allows and ensures the community and others to be a part of that. So I find that to be kind of one of the solutions. And we're why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about your upcoming book, man, and what you find in your writing, what that whole process is like, what it does for you, and what do you think it's going to do for others?
Well, for me, it's always been the idea of it starts with ideas, and it starts with that the inner cognition, right? And that to me has always been a very. I apologize if my dog starts flipping out. The lawnmowers are going crazy around here. So
It's all good.
Sunday morning and a fucking beautiful day out. But I'm glad to be chatting with you guys. But yeah, the writing process is I don't know, man. Like I always found that I had a very highly active inner working. I just started reading shit, what's her name? Dr. Elaine Aron, the highly sensitive person. I fucking connect with that quite a bit. First, when I heard Tyler Heisey of Back Azimuth Solutions, he was like, "Yeah, I'm a highly sensitive person." That dude was a 0311 fucking squad leader, hard dick. And I was like, "Yes, all right, you did it. You said it first. I'm gonna jump on board of that." And that's been a book that I've been wanting to read for a long time. So this is one of those things where I was like, dude, like, how can I like have like how can I be like a highly sensitive person in going to like the Marine Corps, like like that is just like the antithesis of what you know anyone in that like sort of mindset or whatever would do. But it's what I wanted to do. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to kind of get some dirt under my fingernails and shit. And I was writing throughout the Marine Corps. I was when I was on post, I was journaling. I have an extensive written journal that I kind of got in trouble for posting some shit back in the internet cafe, but whatever, it was not a big deal. But it got flagged and stuff. But I throughout that time that process was at the journaling was like more or less like an account of what was kind of happening, some of what my emotions were. Took a fuckload of pictures. I had a Kodak camera. I was the platoon's like intel camera guy, basically. Like, because I had a camera and I knew how to like, work it, and I was capable. I would my platoon commander would be like, "Hey, come take pictures of this shit." So, and then we'd go fucking give it to S2 or whatever the S shop was. I don't remember the numbers, but anyway, so that was cool, and I actually unfortunately lost a bunch of shit, but the hard drive failed, probably because it went through Iraq and shit and fucking that whole travel. But yeah, getting back to your question, the experiential world for me has always been like kind of two flavors, like my inner world, the imagination, the thinking, the ideas, and like the outer world, the stimuli, the fucking shit that, I interact with, the intersubjectivity of, the waking existence. And it's wild, man, that I can find like a platform creatively to have that, whether it's through music or writing. I've always kind of like tried to channel like some like the negative shit, like grief, stuff like that. One of the songs that I wrote in the band that I'm in right now on our last album was about that day where we took heavy losses and heavy contact. So that was super cathartic. It started as like MIDI software on like the it started in MIDI software on my computer, and to bring that to life, to bring that like into a band, to hear people playing the music that like I wrote, that like came out of my head, that's another fucking mind trip in itself, man. Like to have like something that starts in here and like goes into like people's hands and minds and shit, like that's trippy to me. But the writing thing I think has always jived with me because I'm a pretty I like to spend a lot of time like by myself and just doing my own shit. And so writing is definitely a thing of solitude. So I thrive in that. I'm a night owl. I'll find myself up at late, doing research or whatever. Poetry always came really, really easy for me. I've always tried like creative fiction and shit and kind of struggled with it, but the poetry thing has always felt like something that I've been able to grasp and like be able to put out into the world that can still like, hammer home a fucking story. It can hammer home a feeling, an emotion. It can give rise to something, and without having to fucking worry about storyline and arc and character development and blah blah blah. It's like, god damn it, like that is such a I love that stuff. I'm a cinemaphile, like I said, and I love what catches me nowadays outside of like cartoons and lighthearted shit is like, a fucking awesome story, incredible characters, and stuff like that. Like, so I'm hoping to like move into that after Phantoms. But Phantoms is a collection of poetry that I created between 2015, 2016 to now. So it's all pretty brand new. It's all pretty recent. It's all stuff that kind of was started initially through some writing props from the Patrol Base Abate book club, which I've been a big fan of. I actually got chosen to go to their retreat this summer, which I'm super fucking excited about. Probably gonna rub elbows with some of my compatriots and comrades in the writing scene because they're fucking awesome. So a lot of stuff that I did with that went into this book. And then I just kind of sat down and hammered out like brand new stuff that, was my reflection on the end of the GWAT, my coming to grips with being, part of the war machine, part of, like coming to grips with, like basically realizing like I was in like a cult, like a war fighting cult for a little bit. And like, being like subjected and assimilated into that and like and how do I find, because what I find about Marines too is like we drink the Kool-Aid very willingly, especially this like post no more draft era, and like there has to be that mindset of like, yeah, I'm willing to be assimilated into this and I want to go zap the bad guys and shit like that if that's what we're going to be doing. And it's like, how do you separate yourself from that? Like, how do you peel that fucking part of you like away while also still remaining a citizen, someone of that is aware of how fragile our, our society is and our freedoms and liberties are, and how, just very much indoctrinated we are like as a society like into just kind of going about the daily grind and not worrying about what's going on and stuff like that. So like I hope it's a piece of art that just makes people think and gets a feeling out of them. I think some of it is like jerking off the military industrial complex, and some of it is putting a gun to the head of the military industrial complex and being like, why are we still doing this? And so it's very much a duality thing. I explore a lot of duality. Cognitive dissonance is right up my fucking alley. That is the stuff that just comes out of me, and it is paradoxical. It is too, and I write about that. I have an appreciation and a depreciation section right at the beginning of the book that talks about the things that I appreciate and hate about the military and the military industrial complex and the Marine Corps and war and shit like that. But you'll never hear me like talk shit about the war fighters themselves, because like in this age in particular, this post 9/11 era is, I think we are a special group. And I try to be humble most of the time, but I'm going to share it with you guys because it's not just me talking to myself, I don't think. And I think that we have something to contribute to this fucking society that is full of hundreds of millions of people that just they don't know any better, and it's not their fault. But like, yeah. So I hope that my book speaks to some people.
Yeah. I know it will. Polly says this all the time, and I agree with it. Um, Something about combat or being down range, you're gifted with sight, and that sight, it can it does something to you, and I think you can use it either for good or for bad. Um, and so I kind of leave that open ended with some folks. I know for me that it's been good, but at times it's kind of been bad. Sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I could go back into the bubble, but that shit's been popped. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a big thing with me. Like, it's sad for me to think about, like, the issues we're having with people wanting to join and like serve and stuff. And I know like there's this whole idea amongst civilians, like I kind of touched on. It's like, why would you do that? Like, why would you like give yourself like that? You know, like you said, you're willing to be sucked in and, you know, forced to like form into this thing. And it's like, but man, me and Jose have talked so many times, like a lot of the shit I love and miss about the military isn't the war shit. It's the stuff that you do with your homies, like in the downtime, in the mortar pit, smoking and joking. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff that is the, how would you say, like that's just the essence of what it is. That's what I meant. Like that's what gives me chills right now. Thinking about having the opportunity to have experienced that kind of hardship, like not like death and shit, that type of hardship, but like the hardship of like something physically being hard or gritty or just miserable because there's fucking mosquitoes everywhere and you're in a defense week for fucking, 3 or 4 days or, living out of holes and there's a fucking alligator in the New River right there. And you're like, oh shit, like those kind of like, or like homie gets a spider bit his lip and his face blows up. Like it's like those are like I love having had that opportunity to experience that, and I think that that's what's so like if I could be a recruiter, I feel like I would be able to sell that to somebody that wanted to have community. Like there's a lot of fucking loners in the Marine Corps. And I'm not saying like I wasn't. I'm a pretty like social dude, but kind of like you, I wanted to prove myself to myself, and I love teamwork. Like I would rather succeed in a group than on my own. And I think if people have those type of characteristics, you're fucking a shoe in, man. You should go do this because I always say it teaches you how, it's like forced toleration, right? It teaches you how to tolerate a bunch of different types of people. You get to succeed as a team, which is way more rewarding. And it's even whether you're going downrange or not, like those are useful life skills that even if you never get to pull a trigger, hopefully you don't have to against another human being, like you can get out and become a dramatically successful individual just based off of that alone. And I always say to like civilians, I'm like, man, I know people personally that if they did not join, no matter what they had to participate in, their life would be fucking, they would probably be a drunk in fucking Alaska somewhere because they didn't have the opportunity or they weren't going to seek it out unless somebody roped them in and said, here's what you can be. Bam, there you are, the world. And now you're just crushing it. And it's like, we talk about this. Success is an opinion on, what somebody thinks someone else's life should be. Like that's not, you can't cast that on to everyone what your beliefs are, but you can make something out of yourself. And sometimes you just need a little push in the back and it's like, there you go, bud, you got it, and um so yeah, I just, hopefully through wherever people get their inspiration from, if it's, reading books or other people's shared experiences or listening to it, hopefully it makes them like guides them into the life that's meant for them, right? Like I yeah, I don't know. It just it's and I don't hate this. I love this that we talk, but I think a lot of people that don't know how to share their feelings or opinions on things, in a constructive way, they're standoffish towards it, right? They start kind of treating you different, like, oh, you're doing this. Like, I'm not looking for attention here. I'm just trying to help people bring like their sense of self to light. There's I'm not going to judge anybody on what they're doing as long as it's not harmful to anyone else or themselves in a way where it's going to be hard for them to turn around from. Like, figure it out, man. And for anybody that listens to this, being a veteran's not a personality, right? It's a label. It's what you are, it's what you did. It's not your personality. We need to try to find things outside of that, like writing music. I'm a I'm a metalhead, dude. I've been in several bands. Like I that especially after getting out, that was a huge passion for me. Like that helped. But you have to find something, you know. Now I do yard work and I cut up wood all the time. That's what I do. And there's a lot of therapy in that for me. Like just, you know, it doesn't fucking matter. I could say that to somebody that doesn't live like I do, and they'd be like, what the fuck you doing that for? Cause I like it, dude. You know, that's the only answer you need. And so yeah, I just love, especially having guests like you come on here and just be like, this is what I do, and like this is what works for me. And I love it. You know, don't just say I'm a veteran and that like I don't know. That's a pet peeve of mine because that's not your personality. That's not who you are. Who are you? What do you like? Do that. You
Right.
know,
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
I'm off my high horse. I go on rants like this a lot because I'm like, man, why is this isn't hard. Like this isn't hard. You just gotta try, And Yoda's like, there is no try, you do or do not. No, there's a try. You can try shit and you can fail at it. There is a try. And I know what he was saying, I know what he was trying to say. But like you can try things. You can be bad at shit. I tried to be a gardener and I fucked all that up. But I'm gonna try again. That was years ago. I'm gonna try again. Like, and I might suck. I'm okay with sucking at shit.
Yeah.
So
But and that speaks to me, like, man, like, as you know, just to what you were saying, like the military, I realize, especially with like the reserve components and shit, I realized that whether we were going to war or not, like prior to 9/11 and shit, like I wanted to do this because I thought it was going to build some character. It was going to take something in me that I had like ideologically and, just kind of just transform it in a way that, was just a little more solid with a little more temperament. And, 9/11 happened, and it's like, well, I guess I might go to war at this point, like I didn't want to like shy away from it. And it's just one of those things where, yeah, like I didn't want to, I carried that boot attitude for a bit, as anyone does, and anyone who doesn't is a liar. But I was like, had that chip on my shoulder, identified as a Marine, blah blah blah. But shortly thereafter, like I had that bitter breakup with the Marine Corps, and I was like, I don't want to be like a Marine anymore or whatnot. The time has healed, and time at work has healed me a bit enough to be like, yeah, that was part of what I did, and I tried it, and like I had this vision of like Recondo, fucking Marsoc Benfo, but that didn't happen, and that's okay. I got what I wanted out of it. I got in the shit, um, and then I made a kind of rash decision that just knocked my career for that out of course. But that's okay too, because I started to go back to school. I tried to just kind of fucking just keep the momentum going. And, I was in bands, just still writing and stuff like that. But, like I just knew that I couldn't just wallow in this like a once I saw like disgruntled vets and shit like that, like I connected with it for a half a minute, and then I was like, this is not what I
yeah.
want to identify as. And like I just don't want to be part of that. And yeah, man, I absolutely agree with you that you can find a way to build character in the military. And I almost wish that there was some kind of mandatory like domestic service. Not even like, oh, you got to go into the army and be a grunt or something, but even just like something to like get people out of their comfort zone, put them in situations in places that they never would have fucking imagined. Like we were saying earlier, like that sort of like I was just in a third world, village fucking a month ago where, and now I'm like
Yeah.
wandering around the city and shit. It's like, whether it's humanitarian aid, stuff like that. I think everybody really needs to, especially in the US where we're so fucking disconnected about that shit. Like everyone really needs to like just get a little bit of dirt under their fingernails and like realize that there's a really big picture out there.
Yeah, man, it's weird. Like we have this huge issue with like anxiety, right? Everybody's got anxiety. We all do for different reasons, but it's like the average person who is so afraid, and I'm not talking about highly sensitive individuals because I'm married to one of those, and I'm pretty sure she read that book you were talking about. But I try to understand that. I'm not like that, but like, what's gonna make you anxious is being unwilling to get out of your comfort zone. All that's going to do is build more anxiety. If you're sitting here just like going to boot camp, you guys, not you guys, but like us, like we all had this. If you have any type of inner dialogue, you had this idea of what boot camp was going to be before you showed up, right? And you were married to that. And then you get there and it's way fucking different, right? Just like anything you do, you're like, "Oh, this is going to play out this way." And then you get there and you're like, "Oh shit." That's like culture. That's what culture shock is, right? Like you have an idea and then it's wildly different from what you imagine. People break down and then they build you up and they form you into what you're supposed to be. Or, some people just do fine with it because they're fine with all the fucked up shit. And it's just like, this is good to go. But yeah, but not like being willing to get out of your comfort zone. I'm not talking about David Goggins running fucking 100-mile races. I'm talking about like having the slightest anxiety about something and then choosing to not do it because you're afraid of what that outcome's going to be. This isn't life or death. These the more you let that type of behavior go on, it just compounds itself. And then you end up with severe, you know, mental handicaps or disorders because you're just like afraid to do anything. It's like, man, you suffer a little. It's good for you,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, dude. That's why I go to Walmart.
Dude, I do
It's the
every
perfect spot to suffer.
every time I go to Walmart, which I'm not proud to admit that I go to Walmart, but there's nothing wrong with Walmart. But like every time I go in there, I literally within 5 minutes, I'm like, why the fuck do I come to this place? But I stick it out. I go get my they got cheap motor oil for your vehicles, so that's mainly why I go there. But
Dude, yeah, I forced myself to go out. Man, it's a challenge, dude. I'm a homebody, and I like staying home
yeah,
because I don't know, I'm of the mindset. It's like you build a place up where you want to be, right? You know what I'm saying? Like you build it up so that. And anyway, I gotta keep doing that. If not,
yeah.
shit, weeks will go by, bro, and I'll be
Yeah, you become a
fucking
hermit, dude, and then you're
yeah,
like,
Yeah.
dude.
you start getting paranoid about everybody else. You're like, what are they doing? Like, what are they doing out there? Dude, I say it all the time. Like, you want to see what at least, your local community's like, go to fucking Walmart. It will blow your mind. You'll be like, holy shit, there's people like this that exist out here. Damn.
Yeah,
But
I live right across from a local city, and we've got a couple shops and stuff like around there that they travel, and I'm like, okay, yeah, those are the city folks, and I live in the burbs, and yeah, it's cool though. I love the diversity around here. It's one of the cool things about living up in the Northeast. It's fucking got its own little rich history, and yeah, Rudy Reyes actually. I was hanging out with him couple of years ago. We had our battalion reunion, and I asked him if he would be the guest speaker, and he was cool, and he was like, "Yeah, man, that'd be awesome." And he was asking, he was like, like, where would you like want to end up? And I said, man, I just love the Northeast, dude. Something about like just like being next to the ocean, being next to the mountains, the forests and shit. It's just I really like it up here. Depending on where you go, it's fucking obviously all kinds of bums and like
yeah.
bad people, but it's a small majority. I think small vocal, minority, but I think for the most part, it's just a pretty nice area that I live in.
Yeah, I saw that on your website. I got a lot of love for Rudy. Um, he was, dude, he was the guy that I wanted to be when
Yeah,
I was in the Marine Corps. Just a fucking absolute PT stud. I met him, man, I met him in 2016 for the first time. I met him, Michael Schlitz, a former Ranger who, man, poor, I shouldn't say poor, ID. just obliterated the Humvee, and the dude was just burnt and lost his hands. Anyway, it was a one of those. It was a memory that I like, that I finally got to meet fucking Rudy Reyes, because we grew up on Generation Kill. Like those were the fucking dudes that we wanted to be like. Well, at least I did.
Hmm.
Um, I have a buddy, actually. This is a funny story. I have a buddy who was in the Marine Corps in between, was it 2011, 2015, something like that. And we're at, because I work in the daytime. I work in the school district, and we were having lunch. He's an SRO, he's a school resource officer. And he's like, "Hey, bro, have you ever seen Generation Kill? I just started watching this." Started laughing. And I was like, "What?" I thought that was like standard issue, dude.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was so weird trying to explain. You know, it's just weird trying to explain that. But no, I got a lot of love for Rudy. He's got a
He's
lot of good
fucking
shit.
awesome.
Yeah. One of the he did a couple of short videos on YouTube. I don't know if you ever get a chance to look it up, or anyone. They're called it's like Rudy Reyes, but it's called Lionheart, and it just talks about some of his vulnerable moments when he was when he was operating in Iraq, and those always stick with me. So I got a lot of love for that guy.
Yeah,
And I call
that was the kind of stuff that like because I was aware that he was like an actor and he was still like doing security forces and private contracting and shit like that. It was the Lionheart shit that I was like, oh, like he's like kind of starting to get into that kind of aspect. And I love that, man. Like I like, like I grew up idolizing like outside of like, LARP dudes in Vietnam. Like I grew up idolizing fucking like Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee and like, dude, Rudy Reyes is like the equivalent of that, to me. And like, just seeing him like open up about that shit and like talking about his childhood, talking about, his upbringing, like dude had a wild ride. And
yeah,
it just makes sense that he was able to like thrive in the Marine Corps and everything. But to even hear him talk about like, just those vulnerable moments, like you said, like was like, wow, like I didn't expect that. So much love to fucking Mr. Reyes. He's a great dude.
yeah. So we're coming up on the end. Um, if you got, I don't know if you have anything more to say, um, but I want to give you the opportunity, if you want to give any of your any guys that were give any guys that made a huge impact in your life or in your Marine Corps career, or you want to say something about, I don't know, maybe the mental health issue that we face in this country, or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've had a really nice, in pretty profound conversation up until this point. So I don't want to, you know, detract from from those points. So I think just to close it off, I just want to say that I really appreciate you guys taking the time to chat with me. I'm just a dude from Rhode Island that, likes to think he can write good. And I'm hoping that, my experience can become a shared experience. And that's really what it's always been about for me is, I could keep this shit to myself and just kind of hang on to it. But once you let things like this out into the world, whatever type of artistic, creative, um, medium it is, once it goes from in here and in here out onto, the intersubjective world that we live in, it's like, wow, that could be pretty profound, man. So I'm hoping that, my shit can speak to somebody. I just appreciate what you guys are doing. I think you guys have had fantastic guests on outside of, just like grunts and people from your unit. I've been kind of scoping some of your episodes, so I feel really privileged to be on this roster. And yeah, that's about it, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah, brother. Thank
Thank
you.
you, man.
Um,
Appreciate you.